All right, we're on, and I have Mutanda here. One of my another one of my first dates. So I thank you for coming on, man. I appreciate it. We're gonna cover a few things. I actually saw you on another podcast, and you were discussing a couple of issues that I think are important. But I didn't really get to hear enough from you. So I've been looking forward to this chance to get you one on one and really learn a little bit more about a couple of things you touched on that podcast, and some. I've been doing a bit of homework. Um, for those of you who don't know Mutanda, you're from Zimbabwe originally, correct?
Zambia. I was born in Zambia.
Zambia, which is what, southern middle of Africa.
Yeah, so you
Yeah.
can imagine the equator cuts the Congo in half, and then Zambia is just south of Congo.
You're landlocked, right? No coast there.
We are landlocked in Zambia, yeah.
And then to Seattle, is that correct?
Yeah, well, I grew up in Seattle, so we moved when I was 4. I grew up in Seattle and been there, ever since, off and on. But I actually work in Columbus, Ohio.
And now you're in Columbus, Ohio. So
Yeah.
maybe you could start there and just explain, because you said there's a little bit of a story there between
Yeah. So,
Seattle
well,
and Columbus.
just that I've, obviously football has been a central part of my life. So I moved to Seattle with my family when I was 4, and then attended university in California. Found my way back to Seattle, where I finished at Seattle University, and I was fortunate enough to play there, and also graduate there and get a teaching degree. Played with the Portland Timbers before they were MLS. This was 2009, my first time playing. So I dabbled in playing a little bit. And
all right, that's it. Podcast is over. I've had a professional player on. That's it.
Yeah.
Done.
Yeah. No, I wish the career would have lasted longer, but it is what it is. I think it's actually helped me a lot with my coaching. They say a lot of that. I don't know, that many coaches are frustrated players, to use a lack of a better term,
Okay.
frustrated. But no, I had a great journey, met some incredible people, and was fortunate to play at that level. Then I actually lived in Canada as well.
Okay.
I lived in Edmonton for a year, played there. And then after that, career kind of petered down, and I went to traveled a little bit, and then got seriously into coaching. And then coaching has taken me different places as well. And then so recently I coached in a bunch of clubs in the Seattle area. And then it was just last year. So it's been about a year and a half now that I've been with the crew. So as an academy coach, that's my current role, U14 head coach in the Columbus Crew Academy. So it's a blast. My family is here in Seattle. My wife and my young son, Mateo, was born last year. So we're my wife and I are so happy and thrilled to have him. It's been a challenge, of course, with COVID, and I know I'm not the only one. We're dealing with so many of that, just within within football as well. It's been a challenge, but so I'm here with them now, home for the holidays. So yeah, that's the story.
Cool. So let's get straight in there. Rising Point.
Yeah.
I've watched. You spoke briefly about it on the other podcast. I watched your 7.5 minute your promo video a few times. My favorite part was around about, if anyone, I'll post a link to this so everyone can watch it. But if you watch at the 2:15 mark, you'll see Mutanda in action with an absolute beautiful give and go. He's through on goal, and a young girl just completely denies your effort there. That was one of my favorite parts.
She wrecked the demo. How dare she?
Yeah, she did. Yeah, it was a beautiful move, and she was having none of it at the end. So, so Rising Point is a soccer program that you started in Seattle, correct?
Yes.
What's different about it? I mean, I know from just watching the 7-minute kind of video and having read a little bit about it, what I think's different about it. But for you, what's different about it?
I would love to turn it around and start there. I'll let you know. But what did you think? What did you find was different from what you've seen? Because
the first thing that struck me about it that was different was it didn't look like a typical soccer experience or soccer club at all. What I saw the players doing, I've seen before, but what struck me as different was the diversity you had in the groups that were on the field or playing futsal or whatever. I saw like older girls playing with boys the same age. I saw older girls playing with younger boys. I saw a real mix of not only sort of ethnically diverse. It was colorful, but I also saw it was integrated. It was co-ed. It was boys and girls, and it also seemed like there was a range of kids of different ages and stages.
Yeah.
So it looked. It just didn't look like what we're typically used to seeing, where it's typically all 2008 boys or all like it looked. I think diverse is just the only way I could really inclusive. Like
Yeah.
it just and it seemed like everyone was. Seemed like the players were just more relaxed. if if
All
that's
right. I like that. Is there anything else?
I mean, obviously from the promo video, right? It sounded like the players and the parents kind of see you as more of a educator. Like not they don't. It doesn't sound like they see you as just a soccer coach. They see you as more of. It seems like there's more, and you're gonna explain this to me, but it seems like there's more lessons being given in that environment than just how to play soccer. Is that accurate?
No, well, listen, if you're getting all that from that video, I think that's great. Credit to the production team for that one. They work with some amazing people to put that together. And, it's weird to talk about it in a way because I'm not actively doing it right now because of my role in Columbus, but it's something that I'm definitely going to come back to. And I would say first and foremost that it was built on 3 pillars. Number one being accessibility. So I think when you look and you see the range of kids and in terms of ages and stages, in terms of background, in terms of their football ability, accessibility was huge. So we wanted to be inclusive. Absolutely, we want to be inclusive. So I'm glad that's the first pillar. And the second thing is the quality of teaching. I do believe that. There are a lot of programs that will, do one thing but not the other. In terms of like, okay, we have kids and we're giving them access to free soccer, but then maybe the quality isn't there, right? And the coaching, and sometimes that's not, through no fault of the people running the programs, but that's something that I always wanted. Was I wanted the accessibility, but I also wanted quality, right? I believe that we can teach the game, and that kids from various backgrounds can comprehend the game. And then
typically we don't see that, right?
I in my experience, I have not as much.
The higher the quality,
the less inclusive, and the less, absolutely, the more exclusive. And we're talking about really like entry level, right? I understand. I work in an MLS academy, right? So I understand about exclusivity and differentiating for level and all that. I mean, though, we're talking about young kids and grassroots, right? And the importance of.
You have to make that distinction between an MLS academy that can only serve X number of players and is at the highest level.
Yep.
That you expect that can't be accessible to everyone. It just can't.
No. Although short answer, no. But we try to system-wise, it can be, in my opinion. But I understand we're speaking the same language. Then the third pillar for us was, is the community aspect, right? Is that, that what we do in football isn't obviously just about the game, right? It's not just about soccer. It's about also helping kids learn to be young men and women, learn to be advocates for transformational change within their societies, right, within their communities. And like what you saw in the video, the schools, our strategy with Rising Point was to go to schools, because that's all kids are in school, right? So even if a huge barrier to access to quality soccer opportunities is sometimes just as simple as the transportation getting to the location. So we thought, okay, we can bridge that by going to where the kids already are, and then building from there. And so then when you get, teachers and mentors who are already in children's lives, and you also include them in the programming, then it's it's a more holistic.
Good. So that's on my list, like my list of questions. So we're going to get to that school part because I got frustrations with that. So,
Okay.
why did you start it?
Because I felt I was frustrated, disappointed, passionate, called to action. I don't know all these words, but I just felt like it was a dearth of those kinds of opportunities for certain kids in the Seattle area where I grew up. And I started also thinking about how I grew up and the things I had access to, that a lot of kids that I started to, when I seriously got into coaching, I saw that there were big inequalities. And so I wanted to just bridge that gap, or try to change that in some way, make an impact in some way. So I started it because we'll talk about this later as well, but as I fundamentally have an issue with that kind of inequality. I think it's unjust. And when you dive into it and you see it for what it is, you see that it's a systemic problem that no one program can really fix on its own. But if we don't take these steps, there are a whole host of kids who unfortunately are being out.
So common misconception, I think, maybe looking in from the outside, is this type of program only for, how do I say this in a nice way, the disenfranchised, the poor, the lower socioeconomic groups, or can we run a program like this in a more affluent community?
The latter, I would say. So this is what's beautiful, and I try to write about this, and everything that I do from a coaching standpoint. Even when I'm working with I assist with some of the other academy teams. We coach one team and we assist with the others. And when I'm working with the U19s at our academy in Columbus, I'm the same coach in terms of my demands and in terms of my philosophy of how to teach the game, as I am when I'm working with third graders in a school that's low income. Yes, of course, the instruction changes a little bit, the complexity changes, but I mean, in terms of how I view the game, in terms of what I'm asking of the kids, right, relative to their ages and stages of development. So, is that because we all have access to the game is the same, right? The game is the same for all of us. So I don't see it as, oh, we have one set of rules and programming for poor and disadvantaged kids, and then we have another set of rules and for quote unquote elite players and affluent players. No. And that was part of the genesis of Rising Point, of creating something that's accessible but also quality. So yeah.
So I mean, really, it wouldn't matter where you ran it. You could run this. The three pillars there of accessibility, teaching, and community can be applied no matter. It will just be the makeup of who's in it that may change slightly.
So my personal philosophy, and this is I know we'll jump back and forth. I know you want to talk about this later, but it's all linked. So when I talk about, like in the most recent article I wrote about awareness, intentionality, responsibility, playing with air, those are things that I coach my players on right now. And those are things that are built into the key qualities for every kid who comes into the Rising Point program, and both in the past and then in the future, when we build it out is listen, we have to teach kids to be aware. We have to teach kids to be intentional. And we have to teach kids to be responsible. That's football, regardless of where.
it sounds like you're applying that not only to football, but to
Life,
how they conduct themselves outside of football.
absolutely. Absolutely.
So
Yeah.
how's the number one? I mean, you can tell straight off the bat, right? It's not Rising Point Soccer Flames or Eagles. Like, did you intentionally not call it a soccer? Like, what are you? Are you a soccer club, an academy, a program?
I
Like,
think,
how do you kind of?
what box do we need to put ourselves in?
Yeah, I mean, if you have, I struggle with this all the time, man, because people are like, "Well, yeah, you call yourself a soccer academy," and I'm like, you know what? I had this discussion even with someone who's very high in the top of the Canadian game, and I said, "You know what? To be honest, I don't give a fuck which you call me. Academy, club, pro, like we're all the same. We have players, and we teach them to play football, and we try and have some matches." I'm like, the labels need to go.
Yeah. No, honestly, I've gone back. I've gone back and forth, but in the beginning when I was developing it, I thought about that. Like, okay, well, and even as detailed as like, should it be soccer or should it be football? And should it be, you know what I mean? But at the end of the day, I think I'm proud of not just the symbol, but also the idea, the rising point. And I'm proud that it's a little bit ambiguous in terms of like, oh, it's not just football. It's something bigger, because it absolutely is. I like the idea that, uh, you know, what we do is help kids become more aware, more intentional, more responsible, right? Live with air, play with air. Um, and we do it through football, right? So it's a medium, it's a means to an end. And, you know, because at one point or another, um, the game ends, or the game, you know, you don't, people, obviously not everybody goes on to play pro.
Right.
Some kids won't even go on to play beyond high school, but we have a responsibility for every single kid who comes through, to be able to give them something. And not all of them are super passionate about the game, right? There are kids who yeah, they love it and they do it because their friends like it. But then beyond practice, they don't really want to go train on their own. That's fine. And I think I always wanted to have an organization where we are able and willing to take on all those kids, because they all matter. And you know, to the degree that which they love football shouldn't be the that shouldn't be the only reason why we care about them during their time in our program. So the fact that it's not explicitly, you know, football club and soccer club is in part due to, right now, yes, it's a little bit of a hiatus, and I've kind of set it aside while I'm in Columbus, but also because from the beginning we wanted to be bigger than. I'm not going to say just football, because football is amazing and glorious. Obviously, we have to say that, but it's clearly more than that. And I know that from looking at, like, you know, the lives of the kids and the challenges that they have. Their challenges are bigger than football. So, yeah.
Did it take you a while? Like, it sounds like you're quite at peace with having those kids in your program that aren't super passionate and maybe are not going anywhere. Did it take you a while to get to that point? Or have you always been there? Because I know that's something for me. Like, I struggle with that. Like, why are you here? You're not super passionate about this.
Yeah, no, that's.
I'm figuring that must be, I mean, for someone who's also like yourself, who's working with kids at the opposite end of the spectrum, is that something you struggle with at all?
I've made peace, because I think I've made peace with it in part because of my journey. I think you have to make peace with it within, like, yeah, I mean, obviously within yourself before you can project anything onto other people. You have to sort out yourself. The game teaches us that as well. But like, I still feel like I could play at the highest level. Unfortunately, it didn't work out for me. You know, things happen, and whatever, it happens. But to say that I played professionally I'm proud of that. But I also, it lets me know that there's levels, right? And there's always another level. So as good as you can be, amazing, you can be, it's as crazy as it is to say, Leo Messi, I'm sure, has things in his career where he's like, man, I wish I could have that. So I think that's humbling in a way, right? That's really humbling. So it just has always showed me, like, wow, this game really shows you just what life is like for all of us, where it's not necessarily just about getting to the next level or whatever. It's about being at peace with yourself and understanding why you do something. If you are super passionate, to your point, what you just said, if you are super passionate about something, my philosophy is, well, go at it 100%. Like, there's no excuse. So with that background of playing the game, and honestly, because of my parents, really, my parents have been incredible throughout my journey, but I've been at peace with being able to differentiate for the places and spaces in which I'm working in. So, for example, I know if I'm working at an elementary school with kids who are just picking up the game for the first time, I understand and I'm okay with the fact that, hey, maybe the most pressing thing for this child is not executing this soccer action properly, but I'm at school because I need to eat, because I go to school to eat. Right? School is where I get my nutrition, and I struggle with all these other things, and who knows what they've got going on in their lives. So we have to understand that. When I'm working with the academy players, we have some of those same challenges, right? People think that just because people are at that level, then they all of a sudden have this drive. No, some of them do, some of them struggle, and that's partly why some of them don't make it. Of course, it's not like if you do everything right, then you 100% will make it. That's the tough part about it. But no, I'm totally okay with having kids. Like I said, kids need to learn. To me, it's not just about the game. It's about learning, and all kids need to learn. All kids need to have access to that. And then yes, as we get older and things become more demanding, not necessarily from me, but from if the kids want that, then we have honest discussions about, listen, if you want to stay on the team, or not just on the team, but if you want to get to a higher level, this is what you need to do. I'm a firm believer in asking people what they want and then presenting the options, and then they will let you know if they want it or not. If they don't.
So how's the structure and the environment different at Rising Point than your typical soccer club?
Well, so it's hard to say because I'm talking about it sort of in abstract because it's not it's taking a break. But when we were going and how I conceptualize it, I think so. First and foremost, I don't want Rising Point to be just another club in the same system. I want to tackle a system, and I want Rising Point to be. I built Rising Point to be an example, to be I don't know if you want to say leader. There's a lot of people doing this work, but yeah, to exemplify the kind of change I would like to see in U.S. youth soccer. Meaning, for example, let's just talk football, even football terms, smaller numbers at younger ages. So, for example, I don't think that kids should be playing 11v11 at 11 and 12 years old. The pitch is too big. Mm-hmm. Why do we do that? I want to have a system that's different. And so what I have planned for Rising Point is developing a league and a citywide league, right? So starting with one school where we build this program out in a school, and then, build it out in the community, go to another school, and have these kids who are able to compete with one another in this league. But for example, having 10 and 11-year-olds playing 7v7 on a pitch that suits their age and stage of development with smaller goals, etc. So that's just an example.
Yeah, I mean, I feel the same way. Like, I have a huge issue with the same thing as having 11, 12, 13-year-olds play on 11v11 pitch, but also I have a huge issue with this age thing where it's you're 7, 8 years old, so you must play 7v7. And for me, it's more about, are they ready to play 7v7? You could be 9 years old and not be ready. You could be 6-year-olds and you could be ready. So it's trying to be more, I think we need to be, or try and start building systems that are far more flexible and fit the players versus trying to fit the players into our boxes, right?
Yeah. And then another different, I mean, the competition is great. You never hear me say competition is not great. And of course, when we compete on a field in any given match, you want kids to experience success. And what is success in football terms? Scoring goals and ultimately scoring more than your opponent. We get that. That being said, there's no reason to have, you know, state tournaments and trophies and championships for kids who are U9. And I'm being generous because we know that in some places it's even younger than that. But I'm just saying, right? You know, like, what are we doing? And to have different tiers where it's like everybody, so it's like you have a trophy, but it's also everybody gets a trophy. So what is it all about? So anyway, money, how is it different? You know, I want to be driven by the needs of the players. I want to be driven by how kids actually learn. So I study a lot about teaching and about learning, and I want to be driven by helping kids actually take ownership for what happens within the game, as I think they're actually brighter than a lot of soccer programming gives them credit for. And as coaches, sometimes we muddy the waters unnecessarily. And so that's a part of the program that I'm really proud of, because like even with the futsal, what you saw in that film, you know, the kids weren't doing that from day one. Right. There were, but there was a natural progression there where we were playing, you know, at that school we were at, you know, playing futsal in the morning before school for weeks on end and months will get kids better. It's amazing how that happens. So it just kind of shows you that you can build environments and then guide players through the environment rather than saying, hey, every single player needs to fit this particular mold.
This was so this is on my comments here as well. So you had alluded to something along the lines of that typically here we seem to think that we have to give every kid the same set of moves, techniques, and that's what is going to develop good players. And you had said what I liked was that different techniques fit different players. You can't just teach them all the same 10 moves or techniques. Could you maybe explain that to us a bit better?
Absolutely, I'd be happy to. I lean on. I've learned this from coaching mentors that I follow. But let's look at the game, for example, at the highest level. Luka Modric is a right-footed player. Luka Modric often plays the ball with the outside of his right foot to put that curl on it that a naturally left-footed player would just use their left foot for, right? My point in saying that is that's a solution that he's developed from a young age that works for him. It's different than maybe the solution that Xavi Hernandez, using another example. Xavi has another, he has that little spin that he likes to do, that he was doing, where he would receive it on one foot and spin and rotate, and he'd create space for himself. My point in saying this, these are two players at the top of the game. Each move differently. They use different techniques, and we'd say technique is the execution of a decision. So then it doesn't make sense to coach young kids to say, hey, you must do this scissor step overs, or here's how you do this, and then you must do this Cruyff turn, do this, and then boom, now go play. Because the game doesn't work that way, and kids don't learn naturally to move their bodies that way, right? So rather than the focus is on the technique, I think, because it's so easy to see that it's a low-hanging fruit. Like, oh, some kid made a mistake, they didn't trap the ball properly. It's because they didn't use the correct part of their foot. It's like, okay, well, maybe actually the problem is they didn't scan, they weren't in the right space, and their body wasn't oriented properly to then find the solution with the ball. So it's removing the focus from the technique described as really what people mostly mean when they say that is the actual contact that the kids make with the ball. That's what's commonly referred to as technique. It's removing the focus from that and zooming out to what is actually going on, which is perception, use of space, right? Managing your body. Going back to the three things: awareness, intentionality, responsibility. And then, of course, once we have that as a base, then you can zoom in. And sometimes the problem is, the kid was in the correct space. They scanned before, their body was okay, but then yes, maybe they used the wrong surface. And then I would go in and say, hey, what if you tried this surface in that situation? So that's what I mean by
should we,
you know,
I mean, as youth coaches working with, younger beginner kids, like, should we be encouraging more experimentation and asking them to
100%.
find a way, and maybe also even customizing our coaching specific to each player and finding what they can do, what they're good at, and then trying to really maybe enhance that versus saying, well, you don't have the Cruyff turn in your locker. Maybe that's just
and they don't have to have the Cruyff turn. That's, I think, the most important point. Hopefully I was just clear in my what I spoke before about, and using Modric as an example, right? Because again, I use the top players as an example because they all move differently. And the question I always ask people who say, oh no, every kid has to know how to do this, or when you at least watch, when you go to some clubs, right, and you watch coaches work with young players and they are heavily focused on like that, those turns or those moves, it does make me smile a little bit because I'm like, well, when you watch the top level and you watch the very, very best, are they doing those things? Sometimes yes, sometimes not. But you have to be able to watch and see why not. Messi doesn't do step overs.
I've never seen Messi do a Ronaldo chop.
I mean, it doesn't. Yeah, it's like, but and the point there is he a bad player because he doesn't do that? Or would, and here's the really sad part, and I think we know the answer to this, but if we had a Messi, and who knows, maybe we do have, the point is the kids are amazing, right? Maybe we have some who we are snuffing out their beautiful creativity because we're forcing them to do things that maybe there aren't solutions for them, right? So yeah, I think it's a deeper coaching to look and see the characteristics of your players and what solutions that they have that work for them, and then to help them enhance those solutions. That's deeper than saying, hey, you must know how to do this Cruyff turn. And again, I'm not saying, I want to be very, very clear, not saying that there aren't certain, we'll call it actions, football actions that are conducive to a higher level of play. So yes, for example, the ball's coming from my left side, opening with my far foot, which would be my right foot, if it's coming from my left side, to then receive to play this way is a common action that comes out. But here's the point is, if I can design a session where I put a kid in that environment where that is actually reinforced. And if they struggle with that, then I can pinpoint, hey, this is why you're struggling. But typically what I've seen is, and this is working from players at all levels, from the youngest grassroots kids who are just learning how to kick a ball to MLS Academy players, is what kids actually struggle with is their awareness, their intentionality, right? Their understanding of space. That's what they struggle with. And if we can start to help them with that, we can actually then get deeper into the techniques that they use so that they can actually then play faster.
But do you think that's a result of, a lot of coaching environments at the grassroots stages being heavily technically focused and not enough focused on when to do what? I always call it when to do what. When should you do this? When should, like, when's a, and that can be different for each player, but I find that most grassroots environments, they're of two trains of thought. Either the coach doesn't understand when those actions should take place, or there's this kind of preconceived notion these days that 5, 6, 7-year-olds are not very smart. You can't teach them that.
Yeah,
I think absolutely do not believe.
Yeah, no, I think there's a lot going on. And again, a lot of people have written, are you familiar with Todd Bean? I reference his name because with Tovo and because he's the work that he's done. And I've been fortunate to meet him several times and work with him and watch him work. And a lot of people that I follow and mentors of mine, they all believe the things that I'm saying. I'm kind of regurgitating things I've picked up from them that I've fundamentally believe, which is, look, that is the low-hanging fruit in terms of a coaching point, is a technical breakdown, right? So meaning you go watch a 7-year-olds play. A lot of people can coach those kids to be better because the mistakes are really clear, right? Like, hey, the kids are all bunched up, but not only that, they can't trap a ball and all that. All right, it's real easy. When you watch the game at a higher level, the game is faster. Mistakes are relatively fewer, but they're still there.
Yeah.
But my point is, you have to look deeper. I think with coaching, and I'm actually in my taking my A license right now, so I'm heavily involved in coaching education. It's still about, teaching coaches is still about teaching people to see the game, to see and understand the game, so that then they can communicate and help other people be better. So I think fundamentally what's happening in grassroots level is a lot of people, bless their hearts, they do the best they can. Some of it is a lack of understanding of how the game actually functions and what it's all about.
Mm-hmm.
Some of it is a desire to, like I said, this is a good thing, a desire to want to help kids, right? And what they feel they can help kids with is their view of the game. We can't teach what we don't know. We can't teach what we can't see. And so they see technical breakdowns. So what do they coach? Technical breakdowns. But they're not seeing, when they watch the game, they may not see space. They may not see patterns. They may not anticipate actions before they happen. And so then they can't coach the players to do that.
I think it's also from a coaching perspective, it's a quicker feedback and reward.
Yeah.
To teach dribbling for an hour, and you can see that the kid got 20% better at dribbling.
Yeah.
Within the hour, whereas when you're talking about, I think, teaching something like time and space and getting open, that can take months.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's true.
And you really have got to be in it for the long term, and you got to have a lot of patience.
What's amazing though is that it's such a false dawn though when you talk about, we're just doing, we spend an hour on technical work and then we play for the last half hour, 15 minutes. You can say, yes, look, my players are getting better at this, but then when they go play the match on Saturday, well, depends on who you play and how the game, you either have confirmation bias and you think your kids are amazing, or you're like, well, crap, we have to start all over because the kids don't get it. But what's not being interrogated is, well, actually, again, go back to teaching. How do kids learn, and what's important? What are the fundamental concepts that the kids need to learn? Ultimately, the fundamental concepts that people need to learn when it comes to football is, how do you find and exploit space in order to make an action? Because again, I look at, even when we talk about, a lot of focus is on the ball, right? The number one habit that and being the coach of the youngest age group in the academy, I'm blessed to be able to get new group of players who we have to sort of help integrate. So it's an honor and it's a challenge, because I'm taking some of their worst habits that they've got and trying to help them reframe them. The number one habit is, all of the kids want to look at the ball. They're looking at the ball. And so they're not able to then see, actually, right now I should stay away. Oh, here I should go help. Oh, here I can run. Here I need to just stand. And if they don't learn how to play without the ball, they can't learn how to play.
And that's probably no matter, I find it's no matter where the ball is on the field.
No matter where the ball is.
Or not.
Yep. Yeah. They're just fixated on the ball. So we're, and I'm telling you this, these are, if you came to watch me train the U14s at Columbus, you would see a training session where you would see a heavy focus on space and angles and timing, distance, all these things, and the elements of positional play. And you would see less focus, less coaching points on, hey, kick the ball this way, kick the ball that way.
When
I would use those individually to certain players at certain times, but that wouldn't be the bulk of my coaching points.
So when COVID's over, I'm getting that invite, right?
Yeah, sure. Absolutely.
It's not a million miles away from me. Something else you said in the video I want to talk about was, excuse me. You'd said something about kids in, I guess what we would call, typically, soccer first culture countries, are playing far more football at younger ages in unstructured environments. And something you said, sorry, I put you on the spot, Mutanda, but
No worries.
you said that they're developing skills that kids in the USA and Canada are not developing at a young age, if at all.
Yeah.
What is it about those environments, and what is different, and what skills were you kind of talking about?
I'll give you an example. We played last year, this time. The U14s were in Houston, Copa Rayados tournament. And we played a couple teams from Liga MX. The difference in terms of how, and not all their kids were at the level of some of our kids, I'll be honest. I think we had some players who were better. However, to a man, just about every single one of the kids, I'm thinking especially of, God, who do we play? It's been a while now. Oh, we played Monterrey, for example. We played Monterrey's academy team. Every single one of those kids had ability in what I would call impact space. So
what does that mean?
Impact space is the, in our terminology, my terminology, it's the individual and the closest defender, right? So the individual, you, the ball, and then whoever your immediate defender is. And that's your impact space. Their ability in that space, 1v1, right? Typically 1v1. It could be 1v2 though, but their ability in that space is amazing. To be able to shift with the ball, to be able to dance with the ball, to be able to manipulate space, right? To exploit space and just try to get defenders off balance. These are things that, and I've seen this with Rising Point as well, putting kids in a futsal environment, right? Before schools. You work in these tight spaces, or maybe on uneven fields, uneven playing surfaces, and you have to develop a different way of moving your body, right? I can't tell you how many kids I've coached at different clubs in Seattle, quote unquote elite clubs, or really affluent clubs.
Mm-hmm.
And even at the academy level, how many kids have never played street soccer, for example? Now think about that. If you've never played street soccer, it means that you've never played on a surface that's inherently, harsh, right? You fall and it's going to hurt. And some kids slide and stuff, but also just being able to be off balance. Let's say it's a little bit slick, it's a little bit wet. Now you have to run a little bit differently. All these little different things, these intricacies, these complexities that help you, that force you to manage the game a little bit different, manage your body a little bit different. Those help in terms of producing footballers. There's a reason, right? Rest in power, Diego Maradona. We must say that, right? We're talking about a legend of the game who grew up. I'll never forget the images of him. I watching these as a kid. That video of him juggling, right, in his barrio, and just messing around with the ball. And you can see these uneven surfaces and this like that. And as I'm from Zambia, and having gone back there several years ago and looking to see where kids are coming from, like, it's amazing how kids, and they play barefoot, and it's remarkable what they do. So anyway, not to say that the only place to learn how to play or learn how to move is in poverty, because that's not the case. Just saying that a lot of the kids that I think I think the point is we have a very sanitized, very privileged, very comfortable, nice, cozy, not just structure, but playing environment in
it reminds me of, I was before COVID, we went on vacation. We were in the Caribbean and watching a bunch of little kids play soccer on the beach.
Mm-hmm.
And there was like a huge, not huge, but there was a big rock in the middle of their pitch. And then there was also like this runoff stream in the middle of their pitch. And just watching them play, it was like, to get across the stream, they had to, as they were dribbling, they had to flick the ball over it, and they would use the rock to like play 1-2s off of, and it was fascinating to watch. The other thing I find, I think that really helps players develop in that environment is there ain't no age groups.
No, exactly. Yeah. You
Like,
playing against the older boys, and if you happen to run across one, you have to be smart. And yeah, it is what it is. Yeah.
you got to figure out, like, there's a completely different solution you got to come up with when someone is 3 feet taller than you.
Yeah. No, and one of the things I think I'm most proud of, I coached at a youth club in the Seattle area. We trained 3 days a week, and so we train Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday at the time, and on the Wednesday, once I had the team for a little bit and we established our culture and we started to go. Wednesdays was their day to come set up. It was a free play day, and I would be there, of course, and I was watching, and I was watching because it was a lot of fun to watch. And these were high level players within their age group, but I would say, okay, guys, there's the gear. Set up your field, set up your teams, play. It was amazing. The players loved it. And in their feedback at the end of our time together, they talked about, many of them talked about how that was their favorite day. Not that they didn't enjoy the other days where I was more involved in terms of coaching them, but they just loved being able to set up their own games and play. And many of them had never done it. And many of them certainly never had a coach who said, hey, this is going to be our practice today, is you set up your game. And I think when I say like kids are missing that here in the U.S., we're guilty of that even in the academy. I try with the 14s to also have an element of free play. We have tournament, we have tournament Mondays, for example, where it's a tournament, 5v5 tournament. Winner takes, keeps the court. That sort of environment helps players develop. Because kids have to have ownership of the game. If they're not able to set up their own games and play their own games, we're doing them a disservice.
We've been trying to integrate that aspect for a couple of years now, and what I found with our players is they struggle with it's almost an alien concept that you are going to let them do it themselves.
Yeah, right.
And it's always, well, how big is the pitch going to be, coach?
Yeah.
Up to you. Well, can we do this? Yeah. Well, and then they stand there and they're like, well, what the team's going to be? I'm like, whatever you want them to be.
It's yeah.
And it really has taken a number of months to get it to the point where they show up and just, they go do it.
It's beautiful.
But that's been a challenge. It really has.
How old are the kids in question?
And 5 to 12.
Okay, yeah, well that's beautiful. At least you're starting young, I think you can listen. Like I said, you and I are speaking the same language. Kids are amazing. Kids, even at the youngest ages, are capable of that. Ultimately, that's what kids do, right? Young kids, and anyone who's had kids. Listen, I'm a new father, so I'm not claiming to know everything about. But even just watching my son run around, it's like
it gets worse, Mutanda.
They jump right in, right? They jump right in and they try things, and and so when we apply that to a football environment,
I think in sport we've taken that away from them.
And it's really sad. It's really sad, and I think there has to be a place for that, because ultimately, and this is I think what I love about the game more than anything else, is that it's a player's game. Is that as a coach, it doesn't matter what coach you are. It doesn't matter if you're Pep Guardiola. It doesn't matter if you're Jurgen Klopp, or it doesn't matter if you're, U13 tier 3 coach in your state, whatever division you want to. You have the exact same amount of timeouts across the board as a coach. None. So where does the intelligence, where does the ownership have to be? It has to be on the field, which is why I think our primary job is to help players be aware, be intentional, be responsible. I think that starts with helping them set up their own games. Absolutely.
So with Rising Point, one of the things I was thinking about that I didn't get from your video, and maybe I didn't do enough research, how are you going to tackle the challenge of teams and where they play and external competition? Like, what does it look like right now? Because looking at it from the outside, I'm like, well, it doesn't look like he's got a U10 girls team. But how are you going to tackle that challenge? Because like in your area, like, is it like the rest of us I'm sure we're faced with, which is we're forced into these boxes. If you want to be in the league, then you got to be a state association member. You need to have this many teams. It's got to be only 08 boys. And like, how are you gonna tackle that?
By building as quality a program as I can within that school, and then showing people what's possible with what we've done, some of our successes and some of our challenges, and then aligning with people who want to build something similar. As I fundamentally believe that there's a place for a program that doesn't have to your point, like fit into these boxes that other more established associations have, that in my opinion leave a lot to be desired. And I'm really, that's one of the reasons why I said at the beginning, I don't want it to just be a club that's then going to jump into, insert soccer association here. I want it to be a revolution in terms of
so it's
the league framework, right? I want to develop a league, essentially. I can say that I want it to become a league. I don't want it to just be, and by league is maybe not the right word if you want to use coalition or
collective, collaboration.
Absolutely. I want it to be a collaboration. I think there'll be plenty of time for the kids to go off and play in established leagues. And my commitment is to start younger. I think one reflection I had is, and some of the kids you saw in the film, we're starting with sometimes fifth graders or middle school kids. And then I was also coaching high school, I've coached all the 8, lots of different ages, but really this in terms of creating a different environment, it has to start with younger kids, and not that there isn't a place for the older kids, but in terms of making a long lasting, sustainable change and creating new structure, it has to start younger.
So your kind of vision is more to begin with, it's internal play within the program. And then it is go externally and find people that you can work with that aren't married to this 08 best of the best.
Yeah. And not to say that there isn't a place for that, but also that want to help, that there's a time and place for that. Like that isn't my concern right away.
Most of the kids that are at Rising Point, are they kids that don't play in an organized club structure?
No, some do actually. Some of the kids who did, and I mean, again, I keep saying this because it's so true. I saying this without having done any Rising Point work with kids in a year now, a couple of years maybe. But we had some amazing kids that unfortunately I made the decision for a new challenge and then to come back to Rising Point. But we had kids. There's some amazing success stories, and as I dive more into the work, especially once I'm done in Columbus, there's some amazing stories that I'm trying to write down and document of some kids who really thrived in our time together, who also played in other organizations, because you're trying to build a group of kids, a following, or some families, and of course they're going to have other things. But I was very proud that when they came to us and they were part of the things that we were doing, that they really found that they were nourished in a way that maybe they weren't in their other environments. But that also speaks to things that I think the conversations we need to be having, such as this one, about the pros of our current youth soccer landscape, and then some of the cons. And I do believe it's possible to build organizations that do more. And not just, like I said, you started this off by saying, is it just by asking, is it just for low income or a certain group of kids? I think it's for all kids. And yes, I do think that's not saying that, for example, Black and brown kids especially are in need of these things in certain areas, because I will be the first to say I have a special place for those kids who are left out for a lot of systemic reasons. That being said, I know, because of my experience as a coach, as a player, that there are a lot of kids in, let's say, suburban enclaves who are also not being served by their soccer experience. The only difference is, though, they have the means, mostly to still continue to get by because of the nature of the sport, but it doesn't mean that they're thriving. And we see that, and that really is part of what I was saying also in this most recent article about transforming white space. So yeah, it's a big problem. It's a big problem.
I wish there was more options or places where I have a group on my Thursday night. I have a group of 207 boys, 307 girls, 208 girls. I've got a couple of 2011 boys, and they play. Like, I would just love an opportunity to see them play as a team. But there is nowhere.
Mm-hmm.
And then that's the sad thing, that these kids get together, they practice together, they play together all the time, but we're forced to segregate them, right, when it comes to going to play a match against someone. So I suppose it sounds, by the sounds of it, your model is to create that external as well, where that can happen.
Oh, absolutely. There's no reason why.
And we could do that just by tiering, right? All you got to do is play a couple of matches and be like, okay, my team's like, does it really matter what age they are? Like,
so why we do it, and again, I understand, right? For people who are just tuning in or who don't know, like, I work at an MLS academy. I understand differentiation or why you need to organize certain things. But when we really get down to it, that's about competition. And then at the end, it's about winning. And at the end, it's capitalism. It's about making money, right?
But does grassroots have to be that way? I don't think
when you free yourself from those things, and when you're really talking about kids and you talk about what kids need, I think then we should divorce ourselves from only thinking about those things. Then I believe that it opens you should be allowing for as much cross-pollination, if you will, between kids of various backgrounds and skill levels, and just so the kids can play, because ultimately the game is the same for all the kids. But again, I go back to access. And if your program is one in which you can provide access and still, everybody's different in terms of how you want to find the solutions. For me, I found great success and great joy. I think ultimately that's the other thing that drives me, is the joy within the game and the joy that kids have from playing the game. If a kid isn't good enough, we'll just be blunt. If a kid is like really struggling in a certain environment, and that reduces their amount of joy, okay, well then find a place within your organization in which they do find joy. If that happens to be at a younger age because that's where they find joy, okay. And if your organization allows for that, I would say bravo. I want to build an organization that's that flexible, that isn't beholden to try to win state trophies at U11 because that's what the parents think they're paying for. I don't believe in that.
Schools.
So
this has been a frustration. Again, I know we live in opposite ends of the world or continent. How were you successful? Or maybe tell me a little bit about how Rising Point works with it. Like, is it completely based within a school, around one school? And
no.
how have you kind of got access to work with schools? Because it was something I tried a little while ago, and I just got so frustrated with all the red tape, and I got to the point where I'm like, Jesus, I'm trying to do something good here for free, and like, you just can't get out of your own way. And I got fed up with it, and I said, to hell with it. What's your experience been?
Well, this is where a part of it is, I have to thank my wife as well, because she's a school teacher.
Okay.
And so the very first school that Rising Point was in, she was the conduit there. She was heavily involved in helping this program start.
The inside track, Mutanda.
Yeah, and it's on track. But also, and then, so yeah, there's that. And then there's the fact that, I also had my background in teaching as well, from Seattle U. And I think that starting is the hardest thing, right? And finding who to talk to. And, our biggest challenge was there's gonna be, how should I put this? There are hoops that you have to jump through, obviously, as
Right.
you work with kids and you jump at school, of course. That being said, uh, I do believe it's a question of, from the school's point of view, it's a question of will, because once you go through all the processes, right? You've got your background checks, you're organized, you've got a way for uh, your organization to, you've got transparency at least, and you've got parents who are involved. That was a huge thing, getting the parents involved. Then I think it's tough for a school that really is about the development of the children, to say no when you've kind of checked all of these boxes, and you've got, this is the third pillar being the community aspect. When you've got teachers on board in the school itself, well, then now you have advocates who can go to the higher ups. If the higher ups aren't, the principals and administrators, et cetera, are not on board right away, well, then you've got the teachers. So, but if you have teachers, you have administrators, you have then parents, well, then it's a go. So anyway, that's
so how exactly does Rising Point work or collaborate with? Is it one school or is it?
Yeah, no, actually we had a relationship with 3. So I was doing, so yeah. We had, and we were starting on a 4th, but it's essentially, I mean, I guess you could say contracting, getting contracted to go in and do soccer programming, and
During
to
the
be
day?
sometimes during the day, and that's based on your relationship with the school teachers or the gym teachers, for example. I actually, let me back up. The start was a program called Soccer in Schools, right? And Soccer in Schools was a program that a friend of mine helped. He was kind of transitioning out of it, and so he put me in charge of it. And I would go around to different schools in the Seattle area, and do a soccer clinic during gym period for it. So, but I'd work with maybe like half the school during one day, but each kid would get like half an hour, right? Whatever. So, but then I thought about that when I started Rising Point. I thought, well, I like that, but what if we made it a little bit more substantial? So it was, maybe that's where morning futsal, soccer in school, futsal in the morning at the school that my wife used to teach at. We started that, and that's what you saw in the film. And then we also did after school program at a different location, in the same area of Seattle, in South Seattle. So we had those 2 things, and that was, so those were different days. But also I was a high school coach at a high school in the area. So it was kind of like linking all these different things. And the next phase of it was is to develop I got a comprehensive after school program that also has a mentorship aspect, in terms of like the older kids mentoring the younger kids, and then getting soccer instruction at one central location. And that's the next challenge. So the next, I'm working with people. This is there's a laundry list of things to do, but the next big target for us is to build that infrastructure. So build a field at this school, and then deepen our relationship with this school, because we've had great success there. And this actually this wasn't in the film. This is a different school that we've done a lot with in the last year. But yeah, and then just build from there. So,
Cool. So my last part of the Rising Point interrogation.
Yeah. No, is it clear? Like, hopefully you're getting the answers that you've been seeking? Yeah.
Building community.
Yeah.
What does that mean to you, and what does it look like to me? What does that? Give me some examples.
It means that every single it means that every single aspect of a child's, or all the adults, let's put it that way, in a child's life, all the influencers are working hand in hand to give them the best possible education, holistic education. And what I mean is, there's got to be an alignment between the educators at school, the parents, and then the infrastructure in their community to help them do that. So building community, what it means for Rising Point is, like I said, that working in a school itself, and then being a soccer instructor, right? and even when I coached at a club, one of the things I do, I think we can do more of this, to be honest, where it's really powerful, and really there's no, not to sound cynical, but for lack of a better term, there's no place for a kid to hide or to feel like they're not being taken care of if both their soccer instructor or their basketball coach, whoever, their swim coach, is also connected with their school teacher, right? Now you've got wraparound services, and it's like, hey, what you're doing at school is also being reinforced here at soccer, and not in a way that to like, suffocate or like, bore them to death or everything is a lesson, but just to say, hey, listen, me as the coach, I understand what you're going through at school, because every now and then I check in with your teachers, I talk to them. Imagine how powerful that would be for a kid. And I've seen that, right? So being in a school, part of it with Rising Point being in a school, part of the quality there for the kids was that in order to come and take part of soccer instruction that day, there's certain marks or there's certain codes of behavior that they also had to have during the school. So it was like a carrot, like it or not. They were like, okay, this may not be my favorite thing, but I know that soccer's coming. And that gave them a little bit of excitement. I just think that's, all kids have that, you know what it's like where you're waiting for school to end so that you can go play. But imagine if like those people who ran those were not separate entities, but they were all part of one environment. That to me is what community looks like. Another thing is, one of the challenges, like I said, transportation is a challenge. Well, community looks like for me is schools, extracurricular activities, being aligned and having, being connected with businesses that can provide transportation. And that's another thing that Rising Point's that we're seeking to do for our kids. Yes, it helps to have after school busing, but sometimes, let's say for matches on weekdays or on weekends, you might need to partner with a shuttle service or something like that.
Right.
And so it also means the local businesses. There's a barbershop that I frequented in Seattle that helped with some of the funding for a camp that we ran. And this is a Black-owned barbershop, and great. The people, the gentleman who owns the shop actually sent his kids to the summer camp that we had, and he loved the soccer instruction, and they loved the fact that he could help out. So it's like, that's community building this network, building this relationship, so that the kids feel that wraparound love.
So trying to get all those adult mentors in together, working hand in hand.
Yep, educators and businesses and all that infrastructure.
Parents.
Yeah, parents. They're all involved. They're all important, and we need to be mindful. It's part of our job, right? Is maybe not something that we do a lot, and then we spend a lot of time in coaching courses and things like that. But I think it's huge, and being able to communicate with parents and set the example, because especially from the youngest age, the parents are the biggest influencers. And so I always thought, like, if we can at least help influence the parents, then the kids will be all right. And look, in some cases, and unfortunately, we know that some kids are coming from places where they don't have that, which is another reason why we need to have that community aspect when they do get to school, or they come to us, because in terms of, sport instruction at the end of the day, because that may be the only place where they get that kind of attention. So anyway, just being mindful of that.
Yeah. What do you think going forward? What do you think your largest challenge with it's going to be? Because it sounds like you kind of have the structure there. Obviously, the training part you got covered. Like, sounds like you know what you're doing. Do you think it's going to be that external competition, and that it just seems to be that? To me, that's one of the biggest things that we face the challenge with, right? Is just this thirst from adults to, like you say, win the state championship at U8, and it's hard to slow people down, right, and get a little bit more perspective.
Yeah, funny enough, I'm not so worried about that.
No,
I've made peace with that. No, because I'm not competing with these other super clubs that are providing I think, listen, lots of good experiences. I came up through that system. I get it. And my younger brother came up even more recently. But I firmly believe that if you build something quality enough, and that you not just reflected, but that uh you've thought deeply about it, and you've built it, and you're confident in it, that's enough, and that you can bring people. When if you build that whole thing, if you build it, they'll come. I believe that, and I've seen that. We haven't done. I mean, we've only been in existence for a little bit, and again, I stepped away. We were gaining traction. I believe there is a thirst for this kind of programming within the youth soccer landscape. I know it. I've talked to so many people, and I'm comfortable sort of being a little bit different, maybe not having as big a budget, okay, but then serving. And if we serve a smaller percentage of people, okay, but we're going to serve them in the way that I feel is right, and I'm happy with that. The biggest challenge is going to be, listen, I understand people need to eat. Funding, I understand that when we talk about having quality coaches, you have to pay people for their time, for their labor, and I'm under no illusion that it's necessarily going to be uh,
it's really designed to try and serve more people outside of the current system. And if some of the people that are in the current system can benefit from it and enjoy it, then that's the way it is, right?
trying to create a new system.
Yeah.
And I'm comfortable with that. It's a mission. It's hard. It's a lot. Like, I'm not saying it's easy, so I don't. I'm glad though if from the outside it looks like everything is shaping up and it makes sense, because that's great. I think that's a reflection of the time and the effort that's been put into it, and the thought, and hopefully it's also a reflection of just what I've said before about my philosophy, and that I this is who I am. This is who I try to be, and I recognize that the fight is going to be one in which there are a whole number of distractions that can get in the way. And so the only way that I know of dealing with that is by staying true and staying steadfast in this belief that it's about changing systems. It's not necessarily about competing with, oh, well, this kid would rather play in this club. You have my blessing. We don't need to hold on to, as I think this is a myth. When we start breaking down some of the myths in youth soccer, the idea that that like players are somehow these precious commodities only to the degree that they stay within our clubs and help our bottom line, I think is ridiculous. Like, the players are special. If they happen to be in your club, okay, great. If they move on to another club because they feel like that's the best environment for them, you can't really do anything with that. You have to be willing, and you have to be comfortable with letting them go. So, but what we have now is we have people who are clinging on to, no, but we need them back, without really interrogating what it is that we do within our club. It's just that, oh no, they bring us money, so then we just need retention for that sake. No. I want retention because I want kids to find joy in what we do and in the environment that we create. And I think, so anyway.
That's because but that's because players are viewed as, typically they're viewed as a financial transaction, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And also, I've yet to come across many clubs, organizations, programs. Like, everybody's trying to build the biggest empire they can.
Right.
Nobody's like, that's the problem within our youth soccer landscape, right? And I don't know if you find it in where you work, but where I am, everybody's the best. There's no, there is no promotion relegation. There is no actual measure of it. But everybody's got the best pathway. Everybody's got the best coaches. Everybody wants to be the biggest and play at the top of the game.
Right.
There's very few people that are actually focused on creating, developing young players. And like you said, if they leave, they leave.
And then pushing them on. So I do face that, and I can see that, especially working at the top tier in terms of youth soccer, right? The MLS academy level, with clubs who we have better relationships with some clubs than others, simply because people want to hold on to their top players because, yes, it'll help their bottom line, help them win. And I find it ridiculous, because it's like, look, objectively, we can provide a higher level of soccer instruction and pathway than you can for, by the way, no financial cost for the soccer instruction to the families. You can't offer that. That's a big difference. Why aren't you trying to push your kids to us? We have this conversation, and it's sad. It shouldn't be the case, so, but
that's deeply, deeply disturbing that a
it
pro
is.
MLS academy is having those discussions. When I have these discussions, I'm just pissed off that, local XYZ club,
Right.
they're very willing to take our better players,
Right.
but they never give anything back, right? That's the problem. It's always a one-way
Right.
street.
Yeah.
At least in your scenario, you could spin that. I would be using that positively to say, we graduated 3 players to the. Like,
it's part of it. I think is a reflection on people, or it's we need to reflect on what our role is in terms of servicing, right? Like, and we have to be comfortable with that. You have to make peace with, hey, we are looking at the highest level of the game. You look at some European clubs that understand, for example, that they are selling clubs, right? So, we are going to develop these players, but unfortunately we can't keep them because if Real Madrid come calling, off they go. But we know that if we sell one of them for 5 million even, right, that's going to help fund what we do, and then we keep going. It's because these people have reflected on this is who we are. In our youth context here, youth soccer context, when we're talking about reflecting on who we are, I think it's as simple as, well, why do you do what you do, right? And if you do what you do to help kids become the best that they can be, and then a club, whether or not they're MLS or whatever, a youth club comes along that says, hey, you know what, actually we have a little bit better environment, and the kid outgrows your environment, because that does happen.
mm-hmm.
I mean, why wouldn't you be?
I think the problem with youth soccer, though, is everybody is claiming that their environment is better,
but we know objectively it's not true.
Right.
So I would just question that, like, and that's, everybody's claiming their environment's better, but within the same, messed up sort of system. And so that's, going back to Rising Point, it's like, I don't want to compete with that. I want to distance myself from having those kinds of discussions that are often divorced from the real central discussion, which is, what do the kids need? What do the kids need? What are the unique challenges within this locale that make it hard for the kids to become the best that they can be, both on and off the field? And I think if for me, Rising Point has to tackle that. And then if I present that to people and say, this is what we're doing, do you want to join? And they buy in, beautiful. If they don't, at least I've been 100% clear. I've stayed true to who I am, what I believe, what we believe. And then they go off and do, and I say, I wish you all the best. And then later, if they come back and say, you know what, actually, I do actually believe in what you're doing, I say, beautiful, here we are. But this is what we do.
Oh man, I hate to say it, but I can't wait. I'm hoping you finish up with the crew soon so that we can get this Rising Point going. I'm more excited to see where that goes, to be honest.
Same here. It's coming. I can't say too much now, but it's probably coming sooner more rather than later, but it's coming.
Well, you know what, man, I learned a lot today, so it's cleared up a lot. So I'm gonna end up this is part one. Yeah,
okay.
And then let's take a couple of minute break, and then we'll record part 2. Sound good?
I appreciate it, man. Thank you. Yeah.
Cool.